Well, two things I forgot in my announcements before we get going here. One of the benefits and the great joys of last summer with the interns being here was the meals that many of you had with them. The interns last summer said it was one of their favorite parts, but I know for many of you it was also your favorite part. Donnie, you guys stayed up till like 2 a.m. talking, right? Really late, which is really late for Donnie if you know how early he goes to sleep. But for them to see your faith here in town and what you're doing is a great encouragement for them, but also for you to see these young people of faith and the commitment that they're making to serve the church is also just such an encouragement too. So I'll pass this around and give you something fun to do during the sermon, right? To look at. The other thing is, Marion, you snuck in on us. It's her first Sunday back since surgery. And we're so grateful that you've recovered well enough to be back with us. Good to have you here. So, today we are concluding our series on princesses and fairy tales and all those kinds of things. Have you ever noticed that fairy tales need a little magic? They need some oomph to them to get them through, some pixie dust and a wonderful thought, wishing upon a star, a fairy godmother or a demigod in order to get them through in life, to push them over the edge. We are naturally drawn to these stories, I believe, for this reason, because deep down, something inside of us longs for something bigger and greater for ourselves to come in, to rescue us and to save the day. And so you've been being patient, church, as we've gone through Esther and the twists and the turns, and today your patience pays off. It will be rewarded. If you give me 25 minutes, longer if you start dozing off, I'll answer the question about these holes in your heart, about why you feel this way, wanting something greater than yourself. See, up to this point, we've been talking about the faith and the leadership of Esther and Mordecai, how they followed God faithfully wherever God calls them to go. They've stood up and they've been leaders when those around them haven't been. And the biggest question of this book, I've told you we've had 3. How do we have faith? How do we lead? But the biggest question is, where is God? Where is God? All this has been going on. The Jews are being threatened with genocide. And where is God working? Oftentimes in our struggles in life, this turns into a cry of, God, where are you? What is going on? Do you not see me? Are you not looking for me? And yet today, in the story of Esther, the author takes center stage. Pray with me. God, as we continue to open up the book of Esther, grow our faith. Through our spirit, your spirit, make us bold leaders. Pour through me the gift of preaching, that we may have eyes to see and ears to hear how you are working in the world today. All of this through the name of Jesus. It's in his name that I pray. Amen. So here's a little background. This guy named Haman, the Agagite, came into power, second in command of all the Persian Empire, and he's got this beef with the Jews. He has gotten an edict passed, irrevocable law, that all the Jews will be annihilated. After this announcement, prayer and fasting from Mordecai go into place, and Mordecai sends this message to Esther that maybe you came to your royal position for such a time as this. In faith and in leadership, she puts together a plan. She's going to have this great banquet for the king to win him over, to make her requests known. And she invites Haman to this first meal too. It goes really well. I believe she has, it says meal as in steak and wine. In Hebrew, it says filet mignon paired with Cabernet, right? And yet, she's invited the king and Haman to another meal where she will make her requests known to both of them. Haman is proud of himself, but he can't stand that Mordecai won't respect him. Everyone else, but this Mordecai just gets under his skin. So remember, he puts up this pole that's 75 feet high, probably the tallest structure in all of the Persian Empire, in order to impale Mordecai on. And here is where things get good as we pick up on this story. That night, the king could not sleep. So he ordered the book of Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this, the king asked. Nothing has been done for him, his attendants answered. The king said, "Who is in the court?" Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about impaling Mordecai on the pole he had set up for him. His attendants answered, "Haman is standing in the court." "Bring him in," the king ordered. When Haman entered, the king asked him, "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" Now Haman thought to himself, "Who is there that the king would rather honor than me?" So he answered the king, "For the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Then let the robe and the horse be entrusted to one of the king's most notable princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, 'This is what's done for the man the king delights to honor.'" "Go at once," the king commanded Haman. "Get the robe and the horse, and do as you suggested for Mordecai, the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended." So Haman got the robe and the horse. He robed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." Afterwards, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief and told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, "Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin." While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. What a crazy turn of events. I mean, what are the odds that the king would be up, unable to sleep? He's having the history books of his reign read to him, and of all things, they're looking at how Mordecai saved him. Now, we talked earlier that Mordecai's name was written here, but he had never been honored. Usually there's a big promotion for that. But Haman had been honored instead. Haman was getting all the glory. I mean, up to this point, Mordecai had to be thinking no good deed goes unpunished, right? That's at least what I'd be tempted to think. And yet, of all things, the night where everything stood in the balance is when the king reads about Mordecai saving his life. And this is where things turn from coincidence to comical. Okay? Some scholars call Esther chapter 6 the funniest chapter in the entire Bible. It's proof that God has a sense of humor. It sounds like something from a sitcom, like Kramer should appear somewhere or something. Haman's in the courtyard with all the power, with this huge pole. He just can't wait for daybreak so he can go ask the king if he can impale Mordecai on this. And he doesn't even know that while that's going on, that the king is trying to think of how to serve and honor Mordecai. And it's hilarious because Haman's like, "Oh, I'm going to get honored here. What honor would I like to have?" Right? It's like kind of like when you make kids pick your own punishment. It's like similar to that kind of line of thinking right here. And it's kind of weird because he's like, I want to wear the king's clothes, and I want to like have his crest, and I want to ride the king's horse. And this isn't like a pony at the fair, okay? This is more like a Kentucky Derby thoroughbred. This is a war horse. This is like the equivalent of taking the king's designer clothes and riding in their Ferrari. It's like the inspiration for Ferris Bueller's Day Off, okay? That's like this scene going on here. It is supposed to be funny. And Mordecai gets all the glory. Haman is weeping. He's beside himself in grief. He goes to his people again, like we saw him do last week. Build me up, build me up. And his wife is the prophet in the story. His wife says, no, you're going to come to ruin for this. And before anything could happen, before he could make a plan, before he could think about what he's going to do, he's whisked off to this other meeting, and it sounds like this. So the king and Haman went to the Queen Esther's banquet. And as they were drinking wine on the second day, the king again asked, Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. Then Queen Esther answered, if I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition, and spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet. But because no such distress would justify disturbing the king, King Xerxes asked Queen Esther, who is he? Where is he? The man who has dared to do such a thing. Esther said, an adversary and an enemy, this vile Haman. Then Haman was terrified before the king and the queen. The king got up in a rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden, the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. The king exclaimed, will he even molest the queen while she is with me in the house? As soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Hurabana, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, a pole reaching to the height of 50 cubits stands by Haman's house. He had it set up for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king. The king said, impale him on it. So they impaled Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. Then the king's fury subsided. My, how the tables have turned in this story. I mean, just last week, 2 chapters ago, Haman thought he was on top of the world. Everyone was celebrating him. Even the queen liked him. He is the example of the proverb, pride comes before the fall. And yet, for chapters, it looked like Haman's leadership was winning, that he was going to prevail against everyone else. And yet, in the end, Esther and Mordecai come out on top. How? Esther's plan worked flawlessly. Her banquet, she knew just how to speak to the king, just how to speak to Haman, but also to have them in the room at that very moment so the accusation could be put in place and the king could take action quickly. And it's enough to wake up the king to lead. Up to this point, the king has been a lazy drunk who has been putting off leadership to Haman and others. He hasn't been doing his job as king, but now he stands up to lead and to take action. The fasting, the prayers, the faith in action, the good deeds, all of that come back to benefit Esther, Mordecai, and all of God's people. So here's the biggest question in the book of Esther. How did all these coincidences line up in this story? I mean, what are the odds that this orphan Jewish girl taken away as a slave to the Persian Empire would become queen of the Persian Empire? What are the odds that Mordecai would be sitting at the gate that day to hear the secret service for the king planning to assassinate him, and that he would unravel the plot, that it would be put into place and revealed at just the right time? What are the odds that the king wouldn't be able to sleep? That the very section talking about Mordecai saving him would be read to him? What are the odds that Haman would pick the way in which Mordecai would be honored and have to carry it out? What are the odds that Haman would be impaled on the pole set for Mordecai? In fact, it doesn't even stop there. The same day King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. Esther gets all of Mordecai's wealth. Remember that Haman offered to pay off 2/3 of the GDP of the entire empire to have the Jews annihilated. And Esther gets all of Haman's money. Mordecai now takes Haman's place as second in command of the of the Persian Empire. They can't undo Haman's law because it's set in stone, but they can make a new law. The new law is on that day, the Jews would be able to defend themselves. That went throughout all the country. The Jews are armed. They stand up. No one tries to attack them. They all live. This is the happily ever after in the book of Esther. Haman and everything he loves. His sons are killed. He loses his life. He loses his wealth and all of his honor. And Mordecai gets all of that and more. And it is with that that we have to ask this main question. Where is God? I have an interesting piece of Bible trivia for you today. Do you know what the only book in the entire Bible is where God is never mentioned by name? Esther. Esther. God's fingerprints are all over the pages of this. God might not be mentioned by name. God might not speak. But if you have the eyes to see it and the ears to hear it, there is evidence everywhere of God working in this story. And we need this story for such a time as this, church, because it is so easy to live as Christians today like atheists. Functional atheists is what I call them. What I mean by that is we can profess we believe in God. Yes, we're Christians. It's who I am. But our practice in our everyday lives seems to be God-free. Like it's all on me. I got to do it. It's up to me. And I got to put all of this together to make this come into place. There's actually a reason for this. There's a theology called the watchmaker theology. We had a dad come to Aubrey and I's Bible class when we were teenagers growing up to teach us the watchmaker theology. Here's how it goes. God has put everything into motion like a watch. And God has now left. He set it in place, but God is now gone and absent. And if I have to tell you, church, if I believed this theology, I would have left Christianity years ago. It was funny, after the one dad taught this, person after person, dad after dad came in to unteach what he had taught in that class. Because Jesus said that after he left, one greater than them was coming. The story of the Bible is the story of God over and over again working in the lives of his people. And so with that being said, I think one of the most important questions we can often ask of each other in our small groups, with our families, as we're eating at potluck, is where have you seen God working? Where have you seen God working this week, today, in this world, in your life? Because it helps us grow better ears hearing. It helps us to see better and straightens our eyesight about how God is working in this world. It takes time and practice, but I promise you, the more you do it, the better you get at it. So let me give you one simple example of what's been happening with me in the community recently. Elementary school wrestling season ended after a long 10 weeks. I was glad to be gone. We were getting ready to go to Disney World. And a person in the school district who I thought I was close with gave me a call. I was sitting in my office. They asked me a few questions about different practice dates, and that was it. Didn't think anything of it. 5, maybe 10 minutes later, this person sent out a huge email with like 15 people on it. 3 different organizations in town banning my program from the high school the high school wrestling room. The only space in town that we could use. I was so hurt. I'm like, you just talked to me 5 minutes ago. You couldn't mention this? You had this all planned? And I felt like everyone was against me there. I sent an email out, and I just tried to get the conversation going a little bit to see if there was any leeway, anything I could do. Didn't really do anything. But in a couple of days, a phone call came in from someone in the school district that said, I'm not going to take that. Can I help? I said, please do. Email comes in, and then another email comes in support. The superintendent of the school district and all. It's just like compounding of all these things going on. And so we're walking in Disney World, and the principal of the high school calls me. And I'm like, man, we're going to have to set up a meeting to talk about this. That was the content of the email. Let's talk about this. Let's discuss it. Let's see what we can do. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to answer this phone call. I'm just going to set up the time, and let's just get the ball rolling on this. So I'm talking to the principal. None of that comes up. He goes, hey, on Wednesday, as in this coming Wednesday, we have this like breakfast thing where we have the graduates and their parents there, and we want you to be the keynote speaker for it. Whoa, right? I didn't see it going that way. Okay, like if you know there's just a lot of a dynamic there that I felt like Mordecai when Haman came to honor him. Right? Like, are you kidding me? That's where we're going with this. So all that's going on, and this is all sitting in the wings waiting. And this Monday, I'm at a meeting with some other people in town working on some other stuff unrelated to all of this stuff. And one of the people says to another person, hey, that person they mentioned that had kicked me out from using this space, they said, oh, they resigned. They're gone. I had read this story this morning. I'm like, whoa, okay. So I text one of the people in the school district that had been helping me, hey, what's the deal with this? He said, oh yeah, they're gone. It's a non-issue anymore. I've already talked to the new athletic director. You're good to go to use that space next year. I've already worked on it. Don't worry about a thing. I did so little in the story, right? But coincidence after coincidence kept popping up. I was just trying to be faithful, be a person of an integrity, not, get too angry and defensive and those kind of things. It was just all taken care of. How does that happen? Like, I could tell you so many stories of way bigger ways where God has done this for me. I mean, this is the simplest of stories. Let me go so far to say, all my biggest breakthroughs in ministry, I've had nothing to do with. It's just been God saying, here you go. This is it. I can't tell those stories into this microphone. And let me tell you, in ministry and in faith, every Sunday is a little bit of a miracle. Like, God, are you going to bring this together? Do I get to do this for another week? It is this trusting, it is this faithfulness that God is going to do something. And I share this story with you, church, with the bottom of my heart, because I know many of you sitting out there today are in this place in your life. You're like, God, I really need you to do something. I really need you to come through. I'm trusting that you are working here, that you are going to bring this together. See, I told you that the day this all came through, this edict, was the eve of Passover. Right? So as Esther is celebrating Passover, when God led the Jews to freedom, she's like, will God do it again? God shows up again. One of the verses that I think we all need to have memorized as Christians is Exodus chapter 14, verse 14. Standing by the edge of the ocean, they have been faithful. They followed God. They did the Passover. They're walking to the sea. They've plundered Israel. They're in the desert. Their backs are against the ocean. And they say, what is going to happen, God? Have you brought us here so we could die? And Moses has some of the greatest words in all the Bible. The Lord will fight for you. You need only be still. That day was a fireball keeping Pharaoh's army away. It was a way to cross through the ocean on dry land. In Esther, it is something we're more used to. It is coincidence after coincidence of God working. See, Esther and Mordecai are not the main actors in this story. God is. And the way to overcome our functional atheism is to not chalk this all up as coincidence, to see how God is working. What are the odds in these stories after stories that it would just be a coincidence? When do we stop saying it's a coincidence and it is God working in our lives? How do we discern that? How do we discern, is God doing something here? Because something is definitely required on our part. We have to take action in faith. We have to be leaders. But God does even more than we could ask or imagine. The key to overcoming functional atheism is to trust that God is working, and when God shows up, recognize it. See, if faith were a college course, the 101 class would be looking back in your life and saying that God worked in all these ways. I can see how God worked in the past in my life. Faith 201 and 301 would be working on and discerning, okay, here is how God is working in my life now. This is what God is doing. But the 401 class is what Esther and Mordecai has shown here. Even when it appears like God isn't working. Even when we might be tempted to ask, where are you, God? What are you doing? How can this be the plan? The 401 class is having the faith to say, God is working. And so let me end with this. Something inside of us longs for the magic and the powers of a fairy tale. We want the romance of it all. We want the glitz and the glamour of the powers coming in. And yet it turns out we got something better. We got an active and present God working in the world. We got God's Spirit dwelling in us. And God doesn't always give us what we want in our time frame with all the magic we desire, but God has an incredible way of giving us just what we need. And so I love the contemporary worship song, Waymaker. United Voice Worship sings my favorite version of it. Look it up after service. I play it before you guys, before Bible class all the time. But the chorus says, you are Waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. This helps us remember the character of God. That story after story, this is who God has been, and this is who God will continue to be. But I find the bridge to be even more helpful. Even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop. You never stop working. It is the 401 class, the opportunity to stand in faith during the trial. And so, as we conclude, I want to conclude on what I think Esther is. Esther is the story version of Romans 8:28. Paul says what for many of us is our favorite verse in all the Bible, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. So let's go back to that first word. No. He didn't say, we think God's working, or we hope he's working, or we long and we hope for God to work at some time. No. We know that in all things. Can we know it, church? And in all things, the good, the bad things, the defeats, the victories, all things and everything, God is working. Even when we say, God, I don't know how you are going to work in this, somehow God works, because God is going to redeem these things for the good of those he loves and those who love him. Do we believe this, church? And not just are we working in general, but because God loves us, he has called us to him, to work for him. The great story of the Bible is we get to be part of the story. We don't do much of the work, but we get to have a role into it. And the story of Esther is better than any fairy tale. And it can be your story too, if you have the faith and the leadership to follow God wherever he leads you. So now, church, it's our chance. Can we live it?